you can draw this in Procreate. During this easy Procreate tutorial, I will guide you through the steps of creating this little storybook house in a forest. For this tutorial, you don't need any experience at all. The steps are super easy. We'll start with some big shapes, then we'll add some smaller plants, then we'll start adding some details, and finally some texture. And along the way, you will learn all about using the app Procreate. The brushes we'll be using are completely free. If you don't already have them, go to freefromflow.com to get more than 70 free art with flow brushes, and that way you will also get my free ebook about color theory. Now once you have reached the end of this tutorial, I'm sure you will feel very content and proud, and you will just need to share your work. If you are sharing it on Instagram, then do be sure to tag me in the image, not just in the description, because that way I will be able to find your work and maybe we will see it in the next video. Just like these amazing results from my friends at Patreon, for example. That's the place you need to go if you have a serious Procreate tutorial addiction, because there I have more than 100 Procreate tutorials ranging from beginner levels to more advanced levels. So I'm looking forward to seeing you there. But now let's get started with this tutorial. The canvas we'll be working on is 2300 pixels by 3000 pixels, and the color profile is set to sRGB. So go ahead, get your canvas ready, and let's get started. The first thing we'll do is change our background color. Let's make it nice and dark. We'll go to the layer menu and tap background color, and then grab that first color in the first row. And then on our first layer, we are going to start drawing our house. And for our brush, we will use the fine liner brush, which you can find in the treasure chest brush pack. So grab the fine liner brush, and for the color, we'll start with this third color in the first row. And for the front of our house, we are going to draw a pentagon shape. But first, let's check our opacity. It's at 100% because our house, it isn't transparent. And for the size, let's set our brush to 10%. And then we'll just create a simple pentagon shape. So it has 5 corners. So a bit like this. Nice and pointy over here. And then once you have your shape, you can drag in the color to fill it, but you might need to change your color drop threshold. So when you drag it in, move your pen to the right and go for that point where it almost spills all over, because that way you can prevent, or mostly prevent, that you get like a little edge around your edge. So you want everything to be filled. Now, if you want the edges to look a little bit more crisp, or get rid of those wobbles on the corners, you can tap and hold the eraser to grab the eraser, and now it'll be set to the fine liner brush as well. And then you can go along those areas to make it a bit more crisp. Just go along to get nice corners. And now I actually want to move this house down a little bit. So let's go to the Move and Transform tool. That's the little arrow here at the top. And then you can place your pen anywhere and just drag it down. Let's place it about here. And we can always move it again later. But for now, I want it to be over here. And now let's make another layer. Let's go to the layer menu, the 2 little squares, tap the plus, and drag this layer underneath our first layer. And then for the color, we will grab this one over here. That's the 5th color in the first row. And we will make the side of our house. Let's make a shape like this, a diagonal line, and over here as well. And then another line like this. Make sure that your shape is closed, so we can drag in the color to fill it. You can go over there, refine it, or make it a little bit bigger. Or again, you can grab that eraser and make it a bit more tidy. Make those corners a bit more like crisp, just like this. And then it's time to add a roof. We'll do that on a new layer on top of these ones. So first tap layer 1 and then tap the plus And then for the color, we will use this one over here. That's the 7th color in the first row. And let's first go along the front like this and a little bit over that dark area. And on this side, go along the edge, and it'll stick out a little bit over here and move towards that side of the building. We'll also give it a little bit of volume like this. And then back to the top. Then over here, we'll make a diagonal line following that side of the house and make it stick out over here. Then we'll create another diagonal line over here. And this house, it doesn't need like a perfect perspective. It can be a little bit off. It's just a playful little house. And we don't want it to be perfect. It's okay if it's a little bit wonky. It'll give it character. So I guess something like this. Let's drag in a color and then fix any areas that need fixing, any gaps that you see. And of course, again, you can use the eraser if you need to tidy things up. Just grab the eraser. We can make this a little bit more tidy. And top area. Get some nice crisp parts. You can also use the quick shape by holding your pen down, and then you'll get a straight line like this. And erase like that. I feel like maybe we can make the underside of this pentagon shape a little bit diagonal as well. So let's go to that layer, layer 1, grab the eraser, and then make it a little bit more diagonal. Just like that. Then I want to add a little bit of light to the front of our roof. Let's go back to that roof layer, and let's make sure that when we paint here, our paint will only show up on the shape that we already have here. We can set our layer to alpha lock. Now we will only be able to paint on this roof shape. And for the color, we'll use this one over here, the 8th color in the first row. And then let's go along the front side. And again, you can use the quick shape if you like. Then over here. And it instantly gives some volume to that roof. It makes it look less flat. So just like this. And now let's move on. Let's create 2 trees for our scene. But before we do that, I want to move our house a little bit more towards the center. And to do that, we need to select all of these layers to move them all at the same time. And you can do that by sliding to the right on the layers until they are all blue. And then you need to go to that arrow again. And we can simply move it so that it's a bit more centered. And now let's move on to our trees. First, let's go back to the layer menu. And to keep things organized, let's group our layers with all the parts of the house. They are still all selected, so we can select group now. And now we have a nice little group for our house. You can also give it a name, just tap it and use rename. And I will call it house. Then tap the plus for a new layer. We will use that for our trees. And for the color for our trees, we'll use this one over here, the 3rd color in the 2nd row. We'll start right next to the house over here. Let's make a swooping line up. And we'll make a branch over here. We'll go down and make another branch. And it'll be a very simple, bit of like a childish tree. It's storybook style after all. So let's make a very simple tree. Move all the way down. Make a bit of a wobbly shape here. And now let's drag in a color. Now you might need to adjust the color drop threshold again. And now let's draw another tree here on the left side. Let's start about here. Make a line going up, branch over here. Another branch here. Again, a very simple shape. Just try to make something that looks a little bit different than the other tree. All the way down. Bit of a wobbly shape here. Make sure you close all the top parts here. And then drag in the color. And spill all over. We need to adjust the color drop threshold. Like this. And of course you can go over with the eraser in case you want to sculpt your tree a little bit. Maybe you want it to be a little bit thinner. I think this one can be a bit thinner actually. So let's just erase a part. And then grab the brush and make sure that you don't have any of those gaps along the edges. You get those because this brush is a little bit textured. You have texture around the edges. So that's the downside for when using this brush, but I like that texture for our illustration in this case. It'll give more of a hand-drawn feel. I think the texture will really add to the illustration. So just get rid of those edges. It's not a super big deal. And just to be sure, you can also duplicate this layer. You can slide to the left, tap duplicate, and then pinch these together to get rid of any, well, areas that are a little bit transparent perhaps. Now let's check. I feel like everything might be a little bit big for our canvas, so we are going to make it a little bit smaller. Let's select everything actually, slide to the right on both the group and the layer with the trees, and then go to the move and transform tool, the little arrow, and make sure you have it set to uniform. And then you can use any of the handles to make the scene a little bit smaller. Place it about here. I think this will give us enough room. Let's tap the arrow again. And now let's make the underground. The underground for our house and for the trees. Let's tap the plus. First tap the top layer, then tap the plus for a new layer and drag that underneath the house. Then for the brush, let's grab the round chalk brush, which is also part of the treasure chest brush pack, which is totally free. And for the color, we will use this 5th color in the 2nd row. The opacity of the brush is 100%, and let's set the size to, well, let's say 50%. And then we'll make an oval shape, a bit like an oval, a little bit wobbly shape, right underneath our trees and our house. So this will be the underground. This is where all the grass will be and our flowers and our little path. You can make it a little bit wobbly, like I said. Certainly doesn't have to be perfect. You can have a little bit texture around the edges. That'll make it look even better. Then let's also add a path. And we'll do that on a layer on top of this one. So we'll tap the plus. And to make sure that when we draw our path that it won't go over or outside this edge, we are going to set this layer to clipping mask. When you set it to clipping mask, whatever we draw or paint here won't show up outside of the shape of the layer that is, well, that it's clipped to. And for our brush, we will go back to that fine liner brush. And for the color, we use this one over here, the last color in the 3rd row. Now let's make an S shape starting here, right down there, and then another one right next to it. And then make sure the shape is closed by connecting these areas and these over here. And then you can drag in the color. You can adjust the color drop threshold until you are at that point where it's nearly spilling. And then of course you can go in and fix some edges if it's necessary. I think this is looking fine. And now that we have this, we can get started on the foliage. So we'll go back to our trees and we'll make a layer underneath our tree layer. So first we'll tap this group, then we'll tap the plus. And then for the color, we will start with this one over here. It's a quite dark color, third color in the third row. And for the brush, we will still use the fine liner brush. And we are going to make like a big cloud shape, a simple but big cloud shape. Making these semicircles, some big and some small. Try to vary it a little bit to make a very big, simple cloud shape right behind our trees. So it'll look something like this. And then you can drag in the color. Now you can go along the edges to clean it up a little bit to make sure you don't have any edges left. And then once you have done that, we can go ahead and make a new layer on top of this one. We'll tap the plus and we'll move on to the next color. We'll use this one over here, fourth color in the third row. And we'll make another cloud shape, which is a little bit smaller on top. And some parts will be a little bit bigger than the previous one, sticking out. And some parts are smaller. Try to keep it varied. So just a big cloud shape and then drag in the color. Let's also make some floating shapes. Over here, a bit like a bean shape. And maybe one over here. And we can actually also do that for the other layer. Let's go back to layer 8 over here. Switch back to that third color in the third row. And make a big shape over here, for instance, rounded shape. And over here. It's okay if these shapes float. This is not a realistic piece after all. Then drag in the color into these shapes. And then we'll move on and create another layer. So go to the layer menu and then our new layer will be on top of our tree trunks. So first tap that and then tap the plus for a new layer. And then we'll move on to the next color, which is the fifth color in the third row. And our shapes will become a little bit smaller. And it will cover parts of the other shapes. So we'll make some oval shapes. Big one over here. We'll be covering the trunks a bit. And then let's drag in a color to fill these shapes. And what you can do is tap continue filling here at the top and then just drop in the color in all these areas just by tapping. And then we'll move on and create another layer on top of this one. So let's go to the layer menu, tap the plus for a new layer, and we will still use this color, but we will create some extra shapes. For instance, over here, it'll overlap the other one a little bit. And let's also make a shape over here. One over here. Maybe another one here. And then let's drag in the color to fill these areas. And you can use continue filling again. And then tap the brush to get out of that continue filling menu. Next, we are going to add some smaller leaves and we'll do that on a new layer. So let's go back to the layer menu, tap the plus, and this time we will use this color over here, sixth color in the third row. Let's make our brush a little bit smaller. Let's set it to 6%. And let's just make some smaller leaves, just very simple leaf shapes like this in some random areas. So these are just floating around. Covering parts of the other shapes. And you can drag in a color to fill them. And sometimes you might need to adjust the color drop threshold again. I'm going to tap the brush again because we will create even more leaves on this side. Just these random shapes. Here we'll make one covering this part of our trunk, of our branch. And just create a few to get a nice varied effect. And then let's fill these two. And then tap the brush. And now to keep things organized, we can group the layers of our tree as well, just like we did for our house. So let's go to the layer menu and select all of these layers by sliding to the right, then tapping group. Let's close the group like this and then tap it and use rename to name it trees. Next, we are going to add some plants. In this beginning stage, we're just focusing on the biggest shapes. And then later on, we will start adding texture and smaller details. So let's tap the plus for our first plants. And for the color, we will use this one over here, second color in the third row. And for instance, let's start with a few leaves here. And they are just floating around. That's okay in this type of illustration. Now let's make a little stem like this and attach some nice big leaves to it. Just move along that stem. And just make some various leaves. Drag in the color to fill all these leaves. Use continue filling at the top. Just be careful. Sometimes you need to adjust the color drop threshold. And then let's move on to this side. Let's tap the brush. And let's add a little leaf over here. And maybe a little stem here with more rounded leaves. You can vary the shapes. On this side as well. And another little branch, maybe some floating leaves. It'll make it look nice and playful. Then over here, I want a bigger one as well with these rounded leaves. Something like this, and then drag in the color again. Use continue filling and tap in all of these areas. Now that we have a nice variation of blue, let's create a new layer on top of this. Go to the layer menu, tap the plus, and for the color, we will use this one over here. That's the 7th color in the 2nd row. And first, let's create something over here. Let's make a stem like this, and then with a big leaf. You can cover the other leaves, no problem. Just create a nice variety. And over here, perhaps we have something like this with rounded leaves. Just try to create some variety. Then on the other side, let's make a wobbly line going up. And then some of these leaves. then finally I want a big leaf over here. And then let's drag in the color again. Let's drag it in and use continue filling and tap in all of these areas. And just make sure that in between that you go along the edges, check if you don't have any gaps. You can just grab the brush and go over there because that will make it look a bit more tidy. Now we'll make another layer on top of this one. So go to the layer menu, tap the plus, and this time for our color, we will grab the last color in the second row, a nice warm orangey color. And let's create some more leaves. For instance, over here, a nice orange leaf. Maybe some plants here with these rounded leaves. And over here, a bigger one. And maybe some leaves here to get a nice balance. And to nicely distribute these colors over our canvas, let's drag in the color, fill all these shapes, use continue filling. And then grab your brush again to fix any parts that need fixing. Make sure that you have nice, tidy outlines. And now what we need is a moon for our scene. I want to place it over here. Let's just make a layer on top of the others. Let's tap the plus. And for our color, let's grab this one over here. It's the 9th color in the 3rd row. And let's draw our moon. Let's just make a semicircle like this. Hold your pen in place to make it snap to the quick shape, and you can tap your finger on the screen to make it perfectly round. And then make a shape like this inside. And please, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's nice if it's a little bit wonky. You can drag in the color. And maybe we can remove a little part on the inside. So grab the eraser and make it a little bit bigger, that hole. Make a nice sickle moon this way. Now that we have all the big elements, let's continue working on the smaller elements, and let's start with our house. Let's zoom in a little bit so we can focus on our house, and let's start with the front. Let's go to our house group. Let's open it, and let's start right here on this layer. Let's set it to alpha lock so we won't be able to paint outside of the shape. And then for our color, we will grab this one over here, the 10th color in the 1st row. And we are going to make a door. We will make an arch like this, right where our path starts. Let's make the brush a little bit bigger. Let's set it to 10%. Now let's just color this in by hand. Our little door. And then we'll switch to this color over here, 1st color in the 2nd row. And then we'll make another arch shape, which is a little bit smaller. Color it in to create a nice door. Then we'll switch to the next color, 2nd color in the 2nd row, and we'll make our brush a little bit smaller again. Let's set it to 6%. And let's make a little outline for our door, and then some of these vertical lines to add a little bit of interest. Then we'll switch to this color over here, 6th color in the 2nd row, and we'll add a little doorknob. Next, I want to create a little window over here, a circular window, but to do that, we'll make a new layer first. So go to the layer menu, then tap the plus, and then for the color, we will switch back to that last color in the 1st row again, and we will create a circle. So just draw a circle, hold your pen in place, tap one finger on the screen for a perfectly round circle, and then drag in the color. Now you might want to move it around, use the move and transform tool here at the top. You might want to move it around, make it a little bit smaller or bigger. Place it nicely in the center, and then create a new layer on top of this one. Go to the layer menu, tap the plus, and then for the color, we will go back to that 6th color in the 2nd row and make a dark circle on top. So again, draw a circle, hold your pen in place, tap one finger on the screen, and then drag in the color, and then go to the move and transform tool to move it to the center of that lighter circle. So something like this. Then grab the eraser. I feel like it's not entirely centered. Let me go back. You can nudge your thingy by just tapping outside of it. I think this is better. So grab the eraser and then just make a cross shape like this. And there we have our window. Now let's add some extras to our house. Let's go back to this layer. And then for the color, I would like to use this one over here, 2nd color in the 1st row. And then add a light touch here to the side. Let's make the brush a little bit bigger again. Let's set it to 10%. And add a light edge here and over here as well. And I want to add some decorative elements to our house. Let's start by using this color over here, 4th color in the 1st row. And we'll just make some leaf-like patterns. Just like with the plants, you can just add some dabs that look a little bit like leaves. As if someone painted this house and added these nice plant patterns. Perhaps over here. And then let's also add some flowers. Let's use this color for that, the 1st color in the 2nd row. And just make some of these simple flower shapes, just these dabs. And over here. And perhaps one over here. And maybe a little one here. Just do what feels good. Then switch to this color again, 2nd color in the 1st row. And then let's just also add some dots. I think this looks really cute, this little house. Then for the other side, let's move there. Let's go to this layer over here and let's make a layer on top to create some windows. Let's tap the plus, and then for the color, let's grab this one over here, 7th color in the 2nd row. And let's just draw these wonky windows. And one over here. I don't want them to look exactly the same. I want them to be a bit off, a bit wobbly. I don't want them to be perfect. So something like this looks fine. Then grab the eraser and then create a line like this and lines like this. And then we'll go to the magic wand to turn on some lights. We'll go to bloom and slide to the right. To turn on the lights in this house, let's go for 45%. Then we'll go back to this layer, layer 2, to add some decoration here as well. Just to be sure, you can tap the layer and use alpha lock so you won't be able to draw outside of the shape. And then for the color, we'll grab this one over here, 6th color in the 1st row. We'll use that to create some more of those plant-like decorations. Just do whatever comes to mind. Add some little dabs. And then we'll switch to this color, 3rd color in the 1st row. And we'll add some little dots here as well. Then we need to move on to our roof. Let's go there. We have it on layer 3. Alpha lock is already turned on, which is great. And now for the color, we will go to that 9th color in the first row. And we will set the size of our brush to 6%. First, let's add some shadow here along this edge. Let's also make a line in this direction. And here on the front. And remember, it's okay if it's a little bit wonky. It'll add character to your illustration. Now we'll create these diagonal lines along our roof. And again, embrace the wobbliness. Doesn't have to be perfect. Just create a bunch of these. Because this is going to add some nice texture to our roof. Then we'll make these strokes again diagonally, but in the other direction to get this like hatching pattern. I think this looks good. Maybe another line over here. We have a bit of a gap there. Then we'll switch to another brush. We will go to the airbrushing brushes, which are already part of Procreate, and use the soft brush. Now I have the opacity set to 60% and the size of the brush is at 10%. And I will go over that lower right area. Just gently making rotational motions, multiple strokes, adding a little bit of shadow there. So something like this should be fine. Now that we have added all that detail to the house, let's continue and add texture and detail to the rest of our scene. And I would like to start with the trees. Let's go to the layer with the trees. We can close this group. We'll go to the layer with the trees and go to the tree trunk layer. Then we will set this to alpha lock, so we will only be able to paint on these shapes. And then for our brush, we'll go back to the treasure chest brush pack. And it might surprise you, but we are going to use the smudgy hairbrush. And this brush will actually be perfect to add some texture to that tree trunk. For the color, we are going to use this one over here, 4th color in the 2nd row. The opacity is set to 100% and the size will be set to 25%. And we will just go over the trees from the top to the bottom, adding this texture. That nice tree bark texture. And no one will know that this is a hairbrush. So you don't always have to use a brush for what it was created. This brush was created to create hair, but it's also perfect for these trees. So just be creative with your brushes. We'll move on to this one. All the way down. Give it this nice tree bark texture. This one. Something like this. And then let's add some light and shadow. First, we'll add some shadow by creating a layer on top of this one. So we'll tap the plus. And to make sure that our shadow will only show up on our trees, we will set this layer to clipping mask. And to add shadow without losing that texture that we have just created, we are going to use a different layer blending mode. Instead of normal, here we have the N for normal, we will set it to multiply, which is great for shadows. And for the brush, we are going to use the dark noise brush because it gives a nice extra texture. And then for the color, we will use this purple over here. That's the 7th color in the 3rd row. Now the opacity of the brush is at 100% and we'll set the size to 20%. And I will go along the outside of the tree. So here in this case, that's the right side and a little bit underneath here. Making some circular motions. And then here on the left side of the tree, again on the top parts, gives a nice little texture. You can add some more shadow here on the lower side, right behind those plants here as well. And then we'll do something similar for the lights. We'll create another layer on top of this one. So we'll tap the plus and set this layer to clipping mask as well. So tap the layer, turn on clipping mask, and this time we'll set the layer blending mode to screen, which is great to add highlights without losing that texture that we have created using the hairbrush. And now for the color, we will use this one over here, the 8 color in the third row. And this time we'll go over the opposite side. So in this case, on this tree, we'll go over the right side, adding some nice light. A little bit over here. And on this side, for this tree, we'll go over the left side. Until you have something that looks like this. Now let's move on and add some texture to the foliage. Let's go to those layers. Let's first go to that bottom one, layer 8. Let's tap it and turn on alpha lock. So our texture won't show up outside of that shape. And for our brush, we will use the spackle brush. And then for the color, we will use this one over here, 5th color in the third row. Now the opacity of the brush is at 65% and the size is at 45%. And I'll just go over that shape, adding some texture. I'm not sure if you can see it properly on camera actually, but it adds a subtle little texture. If you want to go even more extreme, then you can also switch to this color, 6th color in the third row. And just gently go over the lower area, little pressure to add some more light there. Let's also go over this shape over here a little bit and over here. And now let's do the same for the next layer. Layer 9, first tap it and turn on alpha lock. Then let's first grab this color, 5th color in the third row, and go over there. And add some of that texture, which is very subtle and which you might not see on camera. And then you can switch to that lighter color again, 6th color in the third row, and add some more light. And focus on that lower area, because that's where the moon is. The moon will give some light, and that house as well. So that's where we add that lighter touch. Now we'll move on to the layers that are on top of our tree trunk. So layer 10 and 11. Be sure to turn on alpha lock and then use this light color to add some texture here as well. Making circular motions, gently building up that texture. And then finally for layer 11, we'll do the same, tap it, turn on alpha lock, and go over these shapes, adding some of that light texture. Next, let's add some texture to our bigger plants. Let's close our trees layer, and first let's go to this one. Let's make a new layer on top of it by tapping the plus and setting this to clipping mask. And now we'll set the layer blending mode to multiply again. We are going to add dark texture. For the color, we'll grab the color that we used for the plants. That's the 2nd color in the third row. And first, let's just go over there and add some texture just by making these rotating motions. Just all over, add some texture. Then we will switch to the fine liner brush again. And we have it set to 6% in size. And now let's create some of those leaf veins. Just to add an extra touch, some extra detail to the illustration. So just some simple leaf veins. Until you have added them to all of the leaves. Then we'll follow the same step for the other plants. So first go to this one, tap the plus for a new layer, set it to clipping mask, and then set the layer blending mode to multiply. And we will use the color that we used for these plants. You can tap and hold your finger on the screen to grab it. And then first grab the spackle brush and go over these plants to just add some general texture. So just like this, then we will switch to the fine liner brush again. And then with the fine liner brush, we will add some leaf veins for these leaves as well. And let's move on to the orange plants. Layer 16 here, tap the plus, set this layer to clipping mask, then tap the N and scroll up to multiply. Then grab the spackle brush. And now we can grab the color of the leaves and then just go over and add some of that texture. Just by making these random motions, a little bit rounded motions, circular motions, just like this. Then switch to the fine liner brush again. And then add those veins. Very simple. For these, you can make them a little bit different. A bit like a feather, perhaps. Just make them on one side. You can just play around with it because it doesn't have to be realistic. You can play around with shapes and patterns. Finally, this one. Now for the blue ones, I also want to add a little light touch. Let's go back to that blue plant layer over here and tap the plus for a new layer on top and make sure to set that to clipping mask as well. And then set the layer blending mode to screen. Then we'll still use the fine liner brush. And for the color, we will just grab that blue again. Second color in the third row. And let's go along the edges and add some blue highlights. Just like this, you can also go along that vein. It'll make these blue leaves pop out a little bit more. Right where the moonlight would hit them. And over here, just along the edges. Finally, these leaves. Now we're almost there. Now we just need to work on our grass. First, I want to use a little trick for our underground layer. Let's go there. Let's go to layer 6. And I want to add a layer mask here. We'll tap the layer, then add a mask. And now we have this white layer mask attached to our underground layer. And we are going to paint on this with black. And that will mask parts of that underground layer. And we will use the fine liner brush for that. And let's make it a little bit bigger. Let's set it to 10%. Now let's zoom in a little bit and create some of these grass parts. Maybe some plants with leaves. Maybe some more. Just some random shapes. Random plants. And some shorter grass in between, perhaps. And then on this side as well, some short grass. And some longer leaves here. Perhaps something like this. And some bigger plants with more leaves. Let's make one over here like this. And then with leaves on each side. All the way here, maybe a plant sticking out over here. Maybe some grass. I think this is perfect. Now let's add some darker touches to our grass. Let's go to the layer, layer 6, and let's set it to alpha lock. Then for our brush, let's go back to the round chalk brush. And for the color, we will use this one over here. That's the 6th color in the 2nd row. And let's go over the underside here with rounded motions, adding darker touches there. Just making these little humps, little rounded motions. We can make it darker here as well in the background. Just a bit like this. And then you can switch back to the lighter color, which is the 5th color in the 2nd row. Let's make our brush a little bit smaller, maybe 15%. And let's just make a few of these little humps. Just some random shapes. To add some variety in color here. This should be enough. Now I also want to merge those trees a bit more with the grass. Let's go to that tree layer where we have it in our trees folder. Here we have our layer with the trees. Let's tap it and add a layer mask. And then on this layer mask, we'll paint with black and with our round chalk brush. Now let's make some of these rounded motions to make it blend a bit more with the grass. Or with the, it's more like moss probably. So just some rounded motions, nicely merging it. Now let's go ahead and create some plants in front of our house. So we need a layer that is on top of our house. First, let's close our trees layer. So here we have our house. Let's tap the plus for a new layer. And then for the color, let's start with this one, 9th color in the 2nd row. And for our brush, we will go back to the fine liner brush. And for the size, let's set it to 6% again. Let's zoom in a little bit and add some grass right here in front of our house. And maybe here we can add a little plant like this and leave those shapes open. So it's a bit playful. Then let's switch to this color, the 10th color in the 2nd row, and make some more of those plants right in front of the window here with these open leaves, and over here. Let's make one here. And then for the next color, we'll grab this one over here, the 7th color in the 2nd row. And I would like to make the brush a little bit bigger. Let's set it to 10%. And let's make some dabs here to give that suggestion of probably it's moss. It's not even grass. You know what? Let's go even bigger for our brush. Let's set it to 30%. We'll just create some of these dabs. And it's nice that they're a little bit bigger as you move towards the foreground. So just a few dabs over here as well. I think this looks nice. Let's switch to other colors. Let's grab this one, for instance, the 8th color in the 2nd row. After the brush, we're still using the fine liner brush. I mean, we need to make it a bit smaller again. Let's set it to 10%. And let's just add some of these random flowers just by creating these little dabs. Over here too, maybe some here. Then we'll switch to this color, 1st color in the 3rd row. And you can make some extra grass leaves, maybe some little plants. Just in some random places. Let's also grab this color again, 10th color in the 2nd row, for some more flowers. And you can really just add random stuff in this phase. The more random stuff, the better. Now, as we move towards the foreground, I don't want to go over these areas where we have used that layer mask. So for that area, we will go downward and go to this layer with the path and make a new layer on top. So tap the plus and set this to clipping mask. And on this layer, we can continue moving towards the foreground and adding more stuff to our grass. So for instance, let's first grab this color again, 7th color in the 2nd row. Now let's add some more dabs, maybe some plants like this. And as you go over here, you won't go over those plants that we have created. So make some random dabs in various places and play around with the color. Let's also grab this one, 1st color in the 3rd row. And over here, I would just like to create a group of dabs. And another group over here, right behind these plants, maybe over here. Maybe a little plant here. Group of dabs. Let's also grab that yellow color, the 8th color in the 2nd row, to add even more little plants and some little dabs. Maybe some like grass. There is no right or wrong here. Just be creative with your shapes. Let's also use this color again, 10th color in the 2nd row. Add some more of these simple plants and little dabs and grass shapes. The more, the merrier. Finally, let's also use this color again, the 9th color in the 2nd row. And let's add some grass here along the side. Over here as well. You can go over the path a little bit. speaking of the path, let's add a little gradient there. I think we have enough plants. So let's go to this layer with our little path, our little road. Let's tap it and use alpha lock. And then for our brush, let's grab the soft brush again. Where is it? Here, under airbrushing, the soft brush. And for the color, let's grab this one over here. First color and the third row. And let's go over that underside. Just gently, a little bit more at the bottom so that you get a nice little gradient. I think we can add even more texture by just grabbing the fine liner brush from the treasure chest brush pack and maybe a darker color like this one, fourth color in the second row. And let's just add a few dabs, a few little specks to add a nice little texture here as well. And perhaps we can make it even a little bit darker. Let's go back to that soft brush under airbrushing. And very gently, let's go over this bottom area with this brown. Yeah, I like this. Just a little bit darker. And that's it. You have made it till the end. You have created a lovely storybook house in the forest, and you should be really proud of yourself. So go ahead and share your results. Now that you have finished following this Procreate tutorial, I think this next one is perfect for you. So just follow the link in the upper right corner and keep creating. I would like to thank you for watching, thank you for being here, and I will see you next time for the next tutorial.